In this short video, I'm going to demonstrate Evernote. It's one of my favorite tools that I use really for just about everything. I initially started using it for the blog and my podcast and to share articles on Twitter and Facebook, but really I use it for almost everything now. And I think once you give it a try, I think you might feel the same way. Now, there's free versions. I think once you start using it pretty quickly, you might sign up for the premium version, which I think is $45 a year, maybe $5 a month and $45 a year. There's a lot of products like Moleskine notebooks that you can buy that give you free Evernote service as well, so it's worth checking out. You're looking at the desktop version, which I've basically installed. There's also a web version where you can basically sign into your account through the Evernote web address, but I would highly recommend installing the desktop version. There's also versions for your phone. There's an iPhone or iOS version and an Android version, as well as tablets, and I think that they're really, really good. Think of Evernote sort of as a digital filing system. Think of a file cabinet where you have files, and then within those files you have all sorts of documents. This is essentially a digital version of the same thing. It's basically organized by notebooks, and the notebooks in theory represent a file folder that would be in your file cabinet, and within each of those notebooks you have basically notes, and the notes are essentially the individual documents within each file. Now, I'm going to try to explain this and demonstrate it as I go. There's all different ways that you can basically organize it, starting with notebooks. And everybody does this differently. I basically have a notebook for every major project that I'm kind of working on. I have one for my blog, I have one for my podcast, I have one for all sorts of other things. You have to kind of keep in mind that you can only keep 250 notebooks, so try to keep them as small as possible. I actually have more than I probably need, but you can really organize them however you want. Within each notebook, there's notes, and this is, like I said, it's basically some sort of document where you can save information, and it can be all kinds of information. It can be text, it can be audio, it can be really anything you want to do. And so, if you wanted to type something in, you certainly can, just like any other kind of document word processor system that you wanted to create. Now you can basically make bullet lists and type whatever you want that way. You can certainly, if you wanted to use to-do lists, or you could create the checklist function and then basically do whatever you want. If you wanted to, say, make a grocery list, something like that, something along those lines. You can record audio, basically click the audio button there. You can basically drag in attachments. I don't have one pulled up, but if I wanted to, say, take a PDF, I could literally just drag it into that and basically save it as a file, and then basically you have it in that notebook. Very, very convenient. It's there. It gets synced, so you could look at it later on your phone. You could look at it later on your tablet, anywhere that you want to do it. Another thing that you could do, this is hard to show sort of offline, but I showed you a second ago that there's PDFs that you can put into here. You can also buy scanners, and I've got one. It's a Fujitsu scanner. It's in the resources section on my website, but basically you can use it to scan all sorts of paper documents, and they automatically get uploaded to your Evernote account. Very, very convenient. It's terrific for getting rid of paper documents. So if you're at medical conferences and you get a syllabus, and I think we've all been there as healthcare providers, you get these bookshelves full of conference syllabi. Well, you can scan them in here, and basically you've got a digital copy you can use later on to search, and you can get rid of your paper clutter. Another thing you can do is take photos with your phone or tablet, and then basically that gets uploaded to Evernote. It's really terrific, and I do that a lot for a lot of different things, and then you'll see that in different. Let me see if I can show you one of those. I do that sometimes when I'm looking for my parking space, and I'm at an airport, and I'll find that on there. Let me show you that, where I'll actually take a picture of my parking space so I can remember it 4 or 5 days later at the airport. It actually has a geo search function as well, so if you really can't find that note, because you may have thousands after you use this for a while, then you can just enter it based on where you are, and it pulls up notes within that vicinity. It's like, as you see there. So all sorts of different ways you can use Evernote. Now, when we get back to the individual notes, like let's use the notebook athletes, and this is where I'll kind of keep injuries of famous athletes. Like I said, lots of different ways to enter notes, and I think it's really helpful. You'll see here one of the things that I think is most helpful about Evernote as far as healthcare providers go, whether you're looking to store blog post ideas, and people ask why I have, how I can have hundreds of ideas for blog posts. I mean, a never ending list of ideas. It's because everything I see, I basically save them. Then I can go back later. I last week wrote about the Philadelphia Eagles and their use of sports science. Well, that was based on a lot of articles I had been reading about what they did. So what you can do is basically, and this is the genius thing about Evernote, is use what they call their web clipper. And it's basically a tool that you can install on your web browser. They have it for Chrome and all sorts of others. And then you can basically save the article. And there's versions, like I said, for the tablet and for the phone, but this is easiest to demonstrate on the internet version. So let's say you're on WebMD and you see this article for weight loss surgery. Is it a diabetes cure? And you think, all right, well, that's kind of an interesting idea. Maybe you want to write about it and you want to save it as a blog post idea, or maybe you want to tweet it out and you want to save it for later. So you basically click on this little Evernote logo. This is the Evernote clipper that basically looks like an elephant. You can clip it and then you'll see that. Now there's different ways to save it. You can save it as, its traditional appearance as an article. I like to do it as a simplified article where it basically gets out all the pictures and images and just becomes basically free text. And then you can, but there's other ways to do it. If you like the ads and everything appearing, you can save it as a full page. But again, an article or simplified article is how I most of the time do it. Then you click on which notebook you want to save it to. So in this case, I could save it to my blog. And then you could add tags, like blog post ideas. This is something I potentially would write about. It can be really anything you want. And then basically save it. And you'll see it syncs to your blog. And then now if I were to go and open up my blog notebook and sync it, and you'll find this on your phone as well, in just a couple minutes, it'll actually be in your Evernote account. See, there it is. And then it's saved forever. Terrific. And that's how I don't even know how many notes I have, but I've got to have, I don't know, 5,000-6,000 notes in the couple of years I've used this, probably more than that. But then you think, all right, well, that's all great, but what if I, want to find that and now it's been, 6 months or so and you don't know where it was, you don't know necessarily what notebook you saved it in. Well, the search function is terrific. So just recently I did a podcast episode on cheerleading and whether or not cheerleading should be a sport. Well, I have cheerleading notes saved in all different notebooks for different projects I'm working on. So you can basically just use the search function and find all notes pertaining to cheerleading, and basically everything I've ever clipped or every PDF I've ever dragged into it, every screenshot I've ever taken that has cheerleading in it basically comes up, and it's really, really helpful in that sense. The other nice thing about the search function, that's pretty straightforward. We see that in our email and everything else. Twitter has a search function much like that. But one of the really interesting things about Evernote is that it's got OCR, which I think is optical character recognition. So if you take a picture with words in it, or you basically drag a PDF into it, Evernote will basically run the OCR feature, and you'll see that term. Basically, you can search within the PDF for it, even though it's not free text. So like you see, cheerleading applies there. So, and I do this periodically, like say, for instance, you took pictures of a wine label to remember later. Basically, you give it an hour or so, and then you can basically search for the name within that wine label, and Evernote will actually find it in the picture that you took with your phone. So really, really interesting feature. All I can really say is give it a try. Again, there's a free version, so if you don't like it, you haven't lost anything, but very, very useful for healthcare providers that want to find ways. Maybe you read a lot of articles and you find some you want to share. Evernote's terrific for collecting them, and then you can go back and share them later. You see me do that on Twitter and Facebook a lot. Certainly a terrific way to keep ideas for blog posts. Maybe it's collecting articles for talks. Maybe it's you're doing your research, and you can collect different statistics. You see different images for talks, really a lot of ways. You see I've got a folder for business expenses where I'll basically take a picture of the receipt a lot. You see that here, and then I'll basically keep that, scan it into something that I can then send to my accountant. There's, infinite number of ways to use this. So give it a shot. I think it's really, really helpful, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. If you do try to use it, send me your thoughts. Let me know how it goes. I'm curious what your experience is. Okay, that wraps up my video on Evernote.